to talk about, Donnie, about crisis management, but as I do, Microsoft has just confirmed that 2 of its employees have been diagnosed with coronavirus just this morning. 1 employee at Microsoft, 1 employee at LinkedIn, which Microsoft owns in Puget Sound, Washington. So 2 confirmed cases at Microsoft this morning.
Corporate America is going to have to step up and fill a void that Trump does not, which is basically being honest with people and also directive in saying, look, you can stay home from work. We don't know what we don't know. I mean, that is the thing that's missing from Donald Trump's message. And that is what, if I was standing in front of my old agency right now, I'd say, guys, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. When you tell people what you don't know, it gives more credibility to people who tell them what you do know. And, you know, on the one hand, there's almost a calming thing in that because people are just panicked right now. And you say, it's okay to not know at this point. We're going to take every precaution. We don't know what we don't know, but right now we have Trump using every non-leadership skill you can possibly use. 101, you fail as a CEO. And the reason Donald Trump fails as a CEO continually was he never really ran anything in the first place.
But we see something at the end of this week that we didn't see at the beginning of the week, and that's with more and more cases spreading to more and more states, there's governments now, governors, mayors, talking about what's going on in their state. So the president can't contain the message the way he was once trying, which is why he's continually backpedaling, trying to catch up to what other people are saying. So it really does hurt. I mean, it creates more confusion, but at least there's more information getting out to the public now through their local governments.
You want to get it down to its basic, though? Its basic fundamental problem is the President of the United States, nobody believes him.
Right, and he's also trying to...
That's a huge problem.
And because he's treating this as a political problem, not as a public health crisis. All he does is see it through that lens of politics. And the only reason why he really woke up is because he saw what was happening on the stock market, to Donnie's point where CEOs are trying to figure out how to react because they can't trust the president. And, you know, local governments are trying as hard as they can, but when the president keeps hearing the messages, we don't have enough tests, that adds another pressure. So I think we're going to see a lot more unraveling of this president and his messaging, and it's going to fall more on the shoulders of governors.
Well, you know, Mika, the World Health Organization saying again, we have a crisis, and unfortunately leadership across the planet is responding too slowly to this crisis. From everything we're learning 1 month in, this is an epidemic that can be contained. If you just look at the scant evidence we have, that's what most medical professionals are suggesting. But it requires coordination in governments. It requires a coordination in businesses. It requires a coordination of societies to prepare and to be aggressive in limiting the spread of this epidemic before it becomes a pandemic. Sadly, what Donald Trump is doing right now, and I say this not for any political reasons at all, because this epidemic, if it turns into a pandemic, it will kill Republicans and Democrats alike, conservatives and liberals alike, independents, people of all political stripes. There's nothing political about this virus. If it's not contained, it will kill, and it will kill loved ones, it will kill family members, and it will wreck our economy, much like it is wrecking the Chinese economy, because they, too, at the beginning of this process, were in the state of denial. Our president cannot be in the state of denial anymore. Again, the happier talk he spreads, the more concern he spreads, and, of course, the more losses on the stock market and in our economy we'll see in the coming days, weeks, and months. He's got to get real about this coronavirus, about this epidemic, and stop with the happy talk and start telling the truth.
But another excruciating part of this for him politically and also in terms of getting the country through this, if he cares about that, and he might, is that this lack of availability of testing kits is just dragging this out and not giving Americans a clear idea as to exactly what we're dealing with, which is only going to increase the concern, the paranoia, even the hysteria about it.
You do wonder, how do the South Koreans, how have they and the Italians, the South Koreans have had 10,000 tests a day now for quite some time. Just 3 days ago, we'd only given out 500 tests.
They didn't act.
And the White House hasn't acted. The CDC hasn't acted. The Department of HHS hasn't acted quickly enough. It has been an extraordinarily slow response. Those numbers that you're seeing right now on your screen, and if you're driving the car, it says 4 coronavirus cases in Florida, 2 in Georgia, 1 in Tennessee, 1 in North Carolina. We go across the map. Those numbers are jokes.
Yeah.
They're jokes. Those numbers are so artificially low because we don't have the tests to find out all the people who are positive for the coronavirus that are walking around in schools, in hospitals, and in communities right now.
And the president used the term false number the other night. These are the false numbers you need to be worried about because they truly are. And the healthcare workers that have been exposed, I mean,
by the way,
this is going to only just sort of roll out slowly and then become very big unless there's some way around it, which I don't see.
And by the way, I don't see anybody, and I'll throw this, Willie, to you on the table. I don't see anybody on either side of the political aisle that would dare say that they believe those numbers that we're seeing now are anything but grossly understated. The coronavirus numbers, Willie, much higher in the United States.
And that's why you saw that aid package of $8.3 billion whip through Congress and got all but one vote in the Senate yesterday, Donnie.
Sure. You know, here's 2 things. Number one, that I would suggest to the president, you know, he needs a spokesperson. There needs to be that. It should be a doctor. It should be somebody from the CDC who every day at 5 o'clock can get up to the American people and say, here's where we are. That's what you need. You need that one voice, that one person, because people have nowhere to go. And what did he do? He put Mike Pence in that role, a guy who has never run anything in his life. He was a senator from Indiana, which means you were never in charge. You never organized, a governor, excuse me. You never organized anything. You need to find that one voice.
They have it.
Yeah, unfortunately,
and
he's
they
a
don't
fool.
use it. Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Correct.
They have it. He's right there.
Put him out every day.
He's on the task force. He's standing behind the president of the United States in the initial press conference they had. And guess what? They're afraid of putting him on because he will use facts and tell the truth.
He has been out. Richard Engel did a long interview with him. He's on the Today Show this morning. But to Donnie's point, you can put him out, but whatever the president says is going to swamp whatever these doctors say, because he's going to talk about his polling and why this is Obama's fault and et cetera.
And he can say all that, but people are going to feel this. This isn't like the hoax when he talked about Ukraine or when he talked about the Mueller report. People did not see Ukrainians or Mr. Mueller in their hometowns. They are seeing reaction to the coronavirus at their schools, at their place of worship, in their transportation systems. They're seeing it on here. So they are going to feel this directly and know that the president's not telling them the truth.
Hey, Gene Robinson, you know who older people trust more than anybody else? The doctor. And I think a lot of Americans trust their doctor more than they trust anyone else if they have a fairly decent doctor. And when the president says that everything's going to be sunshine and happiness, when the president says this is going to magically go away in April, when the president says you can go to work if you have the coronavirus, a lot of these older voters are going to go to their doctors, and their doctors are going to say, hey, do not listen to him. You could die if you listen to what he's saying. You have to prepare. And that is the difference between this and, say, Donald Trump lying about his Ukraine call, or Donald Trump lying about the Mueller report, along with Bob Barr lying about the Mueller report. This is personal, and there's verification for every older American who goes, or younger American who goes to the doctor to find out what the truth really is. And they will listen to their doctor more than they'll listen to a lying politician. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.